And now we'll create the water for the ridge here. We'll start with the cube, so press Shift A, add mesh, cube. And I want you to go to the top view with numpad 7, switch to the wireframe view, and let's tab in to the edit mode. And here we still have select circle selected, so click and hold and switch to select box, just to have the default settings. And right now I want to scale this on the y-axis to go all the way along the terrain, but I don't want it to go all the way up to the edge. I want that little edge of the terrain visible where the water will be. I think it adds to the visual interest of the diorama. So let's press S, then Y to lock it on the y-axis, and we can use Control to enable snapping. And if you look from the top or front view or any of these orthographic views, additionally you can see the grid is subdivided into smaller squares, and the control snapping works to snap to those. So we'll just grab it up until here. Okay, and right now I want to move it to the edge, but let's tab out of the edit mode for a second, press G and then X to grab it. And we can hold Control again to snap it right here. Okay. And I moved it in the object mode instead of edit mode because I wanted this pivot point of the object to stay in the middle of the water object. So that's why we exited the edit mode. And we can enter it again by pressing tab. And let's now look from the front side. So press 1 on the numpad. And we want to adjust this shape. So press 1 for the vertex select here. Drag a selection around the bottom ones. Press G to grab these vertices. Then Z to lock them on the Z axis. And drag them up until maybe here, so they are inside the terrain. Okay, and now drag the selection around the top ones. Press G and Z again, and drag them where the water surface you want to be. So, I don't know, maybe here. Okay. Let's go back to the solid view, rotate to perspective, and this is where we'll have our water. So tab out. Now we have our water object ready, and we want to do some interesting surface, some waves, you know, so it actually looks like water. And we can use displacement modifier for that. But before, we need to add some geometry because right now it's just the 6 cube faces. And we could go into the edit mode, so let's do that. And we could subdivide this right away, but since this is not a square object, but it's rectangular, if you press subdivide, you will see that the new faces aren't even, and this wouldn't look so nice on the water surface. So let me press Ctrl Z. So before we subdivide, we will slice this up to create squares. Maybe like this 3 times will be enough. So again, let's press Ctrl R. Use the mouse wheel to increase the count and then click to confirm. And we can press the escape to leave them where they were. And now press 3 for the face select, or click here. Select the first one, hold Control and click the last one to select the whole surface. And right now we can subdivide. So press subdivide, and we can, for a change, use this option here and make some subdivision, maybe 9. It really depends on the level of detail you want to have on your water. So if you look here, the size of the polygons on the terrain, it just makes sense that these waves on the water should be smaller, these details. So let's leave it at 9. And right now we have to create something called vertex group, and it's located here in the object data. So let's click there. But before we create the group, I want to make it smaller. What group does, it just defines some selection, and basically it allows you to save selection of faces or vertices for a later use, for some modifier or something like that. And since I want to use this group for that modifier that will be creating these waves, I really like this edge here and I don't want it to be distorted. So I want to make this selection smaller. And there's a very easy way to do that. When you have some selection and you want to expand or contract the selection, you can hold the control and use plus and minus to control that. So if I press minus by holding control, you can see I'm contracting the selection, and if I press plus, I'm expanding on that. This is very handy in many cases. So let's just set it like this, and then in the object data tab you find the part that says vertex groups, and there is a little plus icon, and this is the same list that the material list uses, so it's the similar control. You just press the plus. Let's name the group, let's call it surface. And to actually create the group, because we just created the empty group, you need to assign these vertices or faces to the group. So click assign, and now we can deselect all here. You can do that by pressing A twice. So let's press A twice. And now if you click select with the surface selected, you can see the group is saved. So you can select and deselect however you like. Now tab out of the edit mode and go to the modifiers tab. Let's add the displace modifier. It's located here under the form, displace. And don't worry about this, it'll get better. So find a vertex group option here under the displace modifier, and let's select the surface. So it just lists all the vertex groups you have on the object and lets you select the one you need. In this particular case we need the surface, and right away you can see the sides or the bottom is unaffected, and only these vertices on the top which we selected are kind of moved away or moved out of the shape. And we can affect this with the texture. So displace modifier, and what displace modifier does is it takes the texture information and projects it onto your object and your geometry and distorts the surface. So here under the texture, since we don't have any, we need to create new, so click new, and we want to name our objects and textures, so let's call it surface. You can find the texture here under the textures tab, but there is a quicker way to do that. Here there is a little icon which allows you to modify the settings on the texture you created, so let's click that. Here you have the name of your texture which you are currently editing, and here is a type. Now it's set to image or movie, and basically what you can do is upload some texture for the displacement, but we'll use some of the predefined textures here. So click this and you can see all kinds of textures here, like noise or Voronoi or something like that, and these are basic procedural textures that you can use in more procedural approach to modeling. So we'll select clouds, and right away you can see this is something that we want to have on the water. We just need to tweak the settings a little bit. So let's play with the size of the texture, and if you go here in the right, you can see under the texture settings there is something called size, and if you play with it, you can see the preview of the texture, how you're affecting the size of the details in the texture, and on your model you can see how it reacts with the model. So it creates these nice large waves, and you can go all the way up to this really distorted surface. So let's set this somewhere to 1, so it's not that wild. And when it comes to the height of the distortion, you can always modify the strength of the modifier itself. So if you switch back to the modifier here, you can find the strength setting, and if you play with that, you can see what it actually does. And let's set this to 0.15 to get this mild, calm water level. Or maybe we can go a little bit higher. Okay, and when we switch back to the texture tab, I think this could go a little bit lower to make it more interesting. Okay, and one last thing that we can do is to tab into the edit mode, go to the object data tab, select the vertex group here, and let's triangulate those. So press Ctrl T, or right click to contextual menu and press triangulate faces. Now tab out, and you have a nice water surface. Let's name our object water here in the outliner. And don't forget to save your scene.